grainy Apple's webcams are. You would think with
they're awful.
like $600 billion, they could create a good webcam, right?
They'll come out with it later for an extra $1,000.
Yeah. The new charger too.
Michael, you have any questions? I've got a few.
Yeah, whoever wants can start it up.
Only a couple. If you want to go first, be my guest.
Yeah, Eric, what's your recommendation of when you're injured? Do you think it's better to fast, or do you think it's better to have kind of a normal diet and rest? Or,
I mean,
a back injury, like a big body, like a big section injury, not a small one like my wrist or a finger or something.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the calorie in. I mean, there is something to be said about calories. It's kind of like common sense. It's like the people that try to, like one of the guys that trains here is worth a couple $100 million, and he was giving me a rant one day about how entrepreneurs can't have avocado toast. And it's like, why the fuck can't you have avocado toast? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really it doesn't. I get his point that if you're spending $15 on toast in the morning at a restaurant, you're going to have a hard time maybe saving money. But it's the same thing with calories, right? Like, I do like the idea of controlling like Bruce Lee said it best. You use form as a way to no form as a way to form. So if you're counting calories as a way to understand your body and to understand how your hormones interact, it can be a good measuring stick. Way too many people are obsessed with it when it doesn't matter. Now, what does matter though is inflammation. So typically if you're fasting, right, you lower inflammation, which allows your body, I think, to heal quicker. That being said, it may be a little bit difficult just because a lot of times people, the routine of exercise combined with good diet, they kind of feed into one another. So sometimes also if it's like a really bad injury and you're going to be laid up for like a week or more, yeah, I really recommend trying to fast and then make use of that time. If it's just like a little like ding or something, I wouldn't say like every time, but if you're having a chronic pain, that could be like some type of like almost like a, like joint disorder, like you have like a chronic bursitis and like say your elbow, your shoulder, your knee, this chronic back pain. It could be because of mechanics are wrong, your mattress is wrong, like ergonomically you're just doing something bad throughout the day, or you're exercising with incorrect technique. But it also makes me believe when people have that, I just tend to believe that they have systemic inflammation. Best way to fix that's fasting. And then after fasting, when it starts feeling better, don't look at fasting as like the panacea, right? That's going to cure. I mean, it's great. It's powerful. But I would say then you got to go in and try to assess what in your diet, like what do you eat? And maybe you have a problem with alcohol, like, like your body doesn't metabolize it correctly. Maybe it's sugar, maybe it's like grain. And me personally, I don't have any food sensitivities other than really hot peppers. They just destroy my insides. But other than that, like I'm fine. So I hear about gluten insensitivities and people that have like, allergies to alcohol and all these other things. I'm not saying that they don't exist. Just me personally, I don't ever experience that. But I do think after fasting, if that helps, then you got to think, then there's something in the diet. So you got to identify that. And usually you want to do an elimination diet where you get the most basic components. I like to say protein and vegetables, like just cruciferous vegetables or leafy greens, and then build off of that. And if you're still inflamed off of that, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the, something in the meat like that. That is something though that I think is really big. So if you notice that you change nothing other than fasting, then you're onto something. There's something in your diet that's causing systemic inflammation.
Michael, you want to?
Oh, yeah, I wasn't sure if you had anything piggybacking off that. Quick question on sort of what we did today. So my typical routine is I started like heavy lifting again since gyms reopened. So I've only been doing like smaller strengthening exercises for the smaller muscles. It's sort of what we did today, like once a week. Do you have like a recommended cadence for that? Like, should I be doing it more? I don't want to be like neglecting anything, but.
So do you do like basically like a squat, deadlift, and bench day? Like do you divide it like that?
Sort of. I'll do like basically two major compound movements 4 times a week. So like on Mondays, I'll do like a squat and bench. On Tuesdays, I'll do like a deadlift and then like a dumbbell press,
Okay.
sort of like a variation.
So you're
And
doing like
then
an upper and lower body movement, like a kind of like either a pull or a squat, and then like a press or a pull for the upper body and counter to that.
basically, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like something like that, like, so you're hitting the whole body 4 times a week. You could take different segments of the body that you feel like you want to work on and just include like, say, 2 sets of like 2 to 3 exercises at the end. Well, most people, like if you look at most traditional, like strength training protocols, typically they have 1 or 2 big motions that they do. Oh, can you just not jump rope right now, Sophia? Typically you'll have like a couple, like, big lifts that you'll do, right? That'll be heavy. You'll take long breaks in between, and then you'll do your assistance lifts. So like, for example, like maybe you're going to do some external rotation. Maybe you're going to do some scapular retraction. Like if you're bench pressing that day, or, whatever. It doesn't have necessarily even coincide, because you're using, basically, if you're doing both upper and lower body every time, I would say just pick different segments. And typically you got to think about the mechanics, right? Your hips, that's hips and shoulders are the ones that are moving the most. The spine's a little bit easier. Usually we flex plenty. So usually working like how we're doing like a rotational extension, something like that for the different segments of the back. The abdominals, the rectus abdominis is obviously firing, all the abdominals are firing. So that's the idea of when you're doing compound lifts, you don't leave a muscle out in theory, but in actuality, you leave a lot out because there's always a compensation. And once the bar gets really heavy, we think everything's firing in unison. That's a myth. That's a myth that's been propagated way too much in functional training circles. So that's why you watch even Olympic lifters, although they do a snatch and a clean and jerk. If you ever watch the cool compilation like videos of their training, they do probably 70 other assistance exercises throughout the week. And the reason being is not everybody's doing the same protocol. The coach looks and says, oh, you need this, like we got a weakness here, or the person has pain. So they know they have pain because something in the tissues compensating to make up for the lifts. So that's kind of like, that becomes your feedback. If all your lifts are going up, you're strong, everything feels good, and you're pain-free, you're moving well, then your program's in order. And so then I just say, just kind of pick randomly different exercises, right? Like maybe you're going to work on your adductors a little bit, your abductors a little bit, maybe your hip flexors. Maybe you're going to stretch a little bit more. There again, there isn't I could make up a million different routines, but it depends upon the individual, what they're looking to accomplish. For powerlifting, I would say, because you think about it, it's mostly all in a sagittal plane, right? You're pressing, you're squatting, you're deadlifting. So I would say naturally just put in some frontal plane motion. That could be as simple as like a lateral lunge, a lateral plank. I would say maybe a little bit of rotation, but don't overdo it, because the body, if you're powerlifting, it's going to tighten into those planes to become good at it too, right? So don't expect to have the range of motion of someone that does only Pilates or yoga or something like that. Just do it for your own, mobility standards.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, I got one more, Eric. Sometimes I notice that you end a workout with like a general purpose Aldoa, and then sometimes you start it with a general purpose Aldoa and then end it with a specific Aldoa. Or just in general, or like just general purpose stretching, like the one where we go on our knees and go and pull everything back.
Yeah, the one that we do. It's the global stretch for the whole anterior chain from the knee up to the neck, essentially.
Yeah. Is there a guideline like when you like to end with general stretches, or when you like to end with specific stretches?
Back to the man Bruce Lee. There again, form as a way to no form as a way to form. When you're first starting, it's like when you teach a kid the alphabet, right? I mean, you think about it. We all know the alphabet. We can just, say it. It takes us 10 seconds to get through it. A, B, C, D, we just fly right through. But for a little kid, it's really necessary in a sense, but it's not. You can totally learn how to speak without ever being able to read, right? Some people have dyslexia. They speak just fine. I think that when it comes to exercise, if following a strict format helps you, by all means. So the strict format, let's just be clear, it's raise body temperature, 1, right? 2, osteoarticular and general movement patterns, right? Even watch like people when they're going to do Olympic lifts and they do their barbell routine, right? Where they'll do different motions, almost the same thing that we do. They just do it with a barbell on their back, right? And they do like, they curl and they lift. You ever watch like Olympic lifters do their pre-lifting routine? It's actually pretty cool. And then they progressively build up the resistance till they get to where they're whatever level they're working at that day. And then if you're doing proper strength training, the truth is, and there again, within your sport, like if you're powerlifting, you have to get the parallel. You don't have to get ass to ankle. You might want to go ass to ankle just to develop the strength, right? But within each sport, there's specific mobility. A lot of people just think more strength's better. In powerlifting, obviously, but more mobility isn't better because it's going to take away from strength, right? And yoga, more strength isn't better. It's going to take away from mobility. So, you know what I mean? Like each thing's got a different parameter at that point. For general fitness, I like the idea of strength and mobility, yin and yang. They're of the same though. That's not a two-part symbol. The black and the white fish are the same fish, right? I mean, the same symbol. They're combined into one. It's not two separate things. So the way that I would think about it is if you're doing a proper session, there should be strength and mobility worked into it. Now, if I notice I did a lot more strength, right? I was doing pistols and L pull-ups, right? I'm really contracting my body tight, handstand push-ups, deadlifts, whatever. Now I know I need to do some stretching, right? Some myofascial stretching. Even though it's strengthening, I'm really asking all those muscle fibers, all those actin and myosin fibers, that all the crossbred hedges, they're going to grab and they're going to pull with all their might. That's how we get stronger. So I would want to actually do some longer stretching to try to get it in there. After today's session, right, the theme was, it was all mobility. We're activating stuff, but nothing got overly tense, right? We're just kind of turning on the muscles. So you'll probably find if you just try to do a stretch that's normally kind of difficult after today's workout, you can probably go a little bit deeper into like a forward bend or a little bit deeper into a squat. So the mobility was already worked into. It's like active mobility. So it really depends upon what you're doing. Like I said, the basic form is activate osteoarticular movement patterns, build up to resistance, whatever you're working, whether it's strength, power, metabolic conditioning. Then we do our stretching, whether it's static or myofascial. The dynamic stretching comes at the beginning. If I'm about to get into a street fight, right, I may that's why you see people bounce and they do a really aggressive motion because they're trying to activate that stretch reflex, right? Before you're about to go out and do your final Olympic lift of your career at the Olympics, you might see a guy like, and start slamming himself. That's different because he's about to give the biggest effort of his life. But for the average person, typically we build up to the crescendo and then we work our way down. And then the end posture, if I'm working specifically with a person, is the L-DOA they need most. When I'm doing the classes here, it's more of like that's why we typically stick with about 4 of them. I typically do 1 for the neck. Sometimes I switch the neck a little bit. Typically for the back, it's T8, T9, or T6, T7, 8, 9, 6, 7. And then for the lower back, L5, S1. All the other stuff's important, but there again, generally everybody needs C4, C5, T6, T7, T8, T9, and L5, S1. Generally, everybody needs those. Then all of the stuff in between, whether it's for the hip, whether it's for the pelvis, whether it's for the shoulder, the scapula, whether it's for any of the other vertebra, that will depend upon the individual. And for a general class, it's kind of not good to do because it builds confusion. And then people, when they start trying to do it on their own, they start confusing the postures and they start mixing it up. And that's the one thing about the L-DOAs is they're very precise. And the gravity squats in L-DOA, so we almost do that one at the beginning every time when we start on the feet. That is an L-DOA. That's why it's different. That's why I don't call it an air squat. I call it a gravity squat because we're maintaining the neutral spine. And then the line one, the general L-DOA. So the gravity squat's a general L-DOA, and then the lion one's a general L-DOA. And I don't think there's, like I said, there's an exact way to go about doing it. It just really depends upon, the individual and also what you're looking to accomplish that day. It really will vary. But the basic format's how I laid it out. Warm up, workout, cool down. The traditional format that we've been told in like men's health, men's fitness, muscle and fitness, it is kind of the correct basic format to teach somebody how to work out.
And one last one. I've been trying to do like smaller workouts, but twice a day. but I haven't gone max intensity probably for a month or two, or I'd say about a month. What do you think is the right cadence for doing like a max workout, like a max hit style, or like a big kettlebell one, or even a big like lifting one?
What are you saying? How often you should do it, or how much should you do when you do it?
Yeah, or how often, considering your max, or near to your max.
Well,
Just
max, honestly, the idea of maxing is almost never, right? Like truly max. If we're going to mark that as high intensity, I'm reading a very interesting book. It's by the guy Daniel Lieberman. He wrote The Story of the Human Body, and his new one just came out called Exercised. And it's about, he's the head of human evolutionary biology. And he also does a lot of anthropology stuff at Harvard. He's a really smart guy, and his books they're fun reads. It's actually, I recommend it for everybody to read. It's a great book. And he does a cool breakdown of it. So he talks about non-industrial people. Basically, nobody's truly indigenous these days. Even indigenous people, they have some contact with the outside world, right? They might get some tobacco. Like everybody's we've kind of polluted everything now. But still, some of these people live very close to the way they always have. And anthropologists started studying them a long time because they have a lot of records. So the average Westerner, and that's the thing, when they do these studies, remember, it's not truly taking the whole post-industrial world. It's talking about essentially Americans, Canadians, and Western Europeans. That's who most of these studies come from, that they do these observational studies of movement, right? So the average Westerner, there again, we're different. What we just did, it says that we're different, but the average Westerner does 5 hours a day, right, of what they call really light activity: walking to the refrigerator, chopping up a vegetable, folding your clothes, walking down the stairs, like literally, things that, and they measure this by heart rate. Then they do 20 minutes of moderate activity. That would be like arm circles, maybe a yoga posture, something that's very gentle, like a cat cow or something, 20 minutes. And then 1 minute of vigorous activity, which constitutes over 70% of your max heart rate. That means they might jog for a minute, the average American, right? Obviously. So if we just did, 45 minutes of what we'd call moderate activity, we're already at a different category, right? So you would think indigenous people must be doing way more. And also there's one more thing. The average Westerner sits between 9 and 13 hours a day and still sleeping 7 hours a day. So that's really, it's like you start thinking about this. So some of that light activity is sitting, right? Doesn't mean they're up on their feet moving the whole time. A lot of them are sitting while, doing stuff or whatever. So they're moving a little bit, but not so much. Indigenous people, right? People that live a pre-industrial life, they don't have machines, they have to do everything themselves. They do 4 hours of light activity, like cooking, cleaning, stuff like that. Then they do 2 hours of moderate activity, right? So things that, maybe carrying some firewood around, but then they do 20 minutes of vigorous activity. And I would say that, when I read that, I was like, I think that's the natural rhythm. As I noticed, people that don't use steroids, people that have a normal recovery, you look at even CrossFitters, right? Like you can't do a 20-minute all-out workout like a Fran on a continuum of 20 thrusters, right? 20 pull-ups for 20 minutes, then come back that day and do it again and do it again. If you do, I can guarantee it, and you're making progress, you're on steroids. I can guarantee you that. I've never seen a person in my life that can just keep coming back, pushing the limit day after day. You have to give recovery. And so if you can give 20 minutes of high exertion, right? And there again, we're talking about real exertion, not like when you're bench pressing, right? You can do multiple workouts and make progress. That's how Olympic lifters do it. They train 6 times, a day, but they give big efforts, big rest, and then they rest for a couple hours. They come back to do it again. They build up over this 4 to 8 to 12 year period to this pinnacle of their career, right? So that is the optimal way to train the nervous system for strength. But there again, they never go to max. They're obsessed with where they test at, what their goal is, and then their percentages of working to that goal. And then they try to hit it on competition day. So the idea of max effort. So I think we're going to talk about vigorous effort, like where I was like, shit, that's a hard workout. I need the rest. You could do that every day. I mean, honestly, every day, but you'd have to, there again, don't become obsessed with like, oh, indigenous people do 20 minutes a day. Remember, they have to. If they, they might go hungry. They have to climb a tree to go get, maybe honey out of it, or they have to run down an animal, or, chop it up into quarters and carry it back. So it becomes more strenuous. But also within anything that you do, the same with those indigenous people, they spend, for them, everything's easier, right? Carrying that extra weight around because they become accustomed to it. That's the efficiency. I don't like it so much because some people think you have to constantly keep making your body inefficient at movement to burn more calories, to push harder, to burn more fat, to compensate for a shitty diet. The thing is, I think everybody knows that's a dumb idea for health and fitness. It sounds great, right? Like I'll just work out more and burn more calories so I can eat more. The reality is you have to find that balance of exercise and nutrition. And it really is a balancing act for everybody. And I think most people, that's what I was saying, I don't really believe in the calorie model because I know plenty of people and they're not loaded with visceral fat. They're healthy and they eat a lot of food. It's the type of food that they eat. And I know a lot of people that really watch their calories and they're constantly battling their weight and they're not cheating. They're not always going in and sneaking like, gummy bears when no one's looking. So I think that it's the hormones too, when it comes to that. And so that's the other part of exercise. We want to optimize the hormones. We want to peak the hormones, but what we should feel, maybe a little bit of fatigue initially, that's normal, but we should always feel like after a couple hours after, like I can do it again. Then we know we're on the right path. If I feel like, oh, fuck, and then the next day I'm just dragging my knuckles on the ground, I went too hard. And now, and that's kind of the thing, is I think exercise should make you feel better, not worse. And if you feel worse because you're exercising, you're either going too hard, nutrition's not right, there's some variable in the program that's not there. And I think the big mistake that most people make is they try to fix everything with more intensity. And that usually leads to injury, which then leads to back pain, which leads to inflammation. And then we overeat, we get depressed. It's that vicious circle, right? So I think intensity should be there, but you have to be intelligent about how you use it. It's strong medicine. Strong medicine, you don't need a lot of it.
Thank you. So you think roughly like 20 minutes of intensity, let's say like, 50 snatches or something, just as a marker.
I think these health councils suck, be honest with you. I mean, look, that's what's going on in the planet today, right? It's just a bunch of extremely unhealthy people, like over 1 billion of them now, like extremely unhealthy. So the recommendation is 150 minutes of exercise per day, right? 150 minutes of exercise. Like that, they consider that walking. 150 minutes. I mean, that's shit. 30 minutes of walking. You know what I mean? That's like, I don't see how people can even, I get if the person's 98 years old, right? And they're in a walker or something, but for the average person, so I'd say 150 minutes of vigorous exercise per week. Okay, I'm cool with that. And that's assuming that then you're doing about 150 minutes of mobility and then about 300 minutes of light physical activity, such as walking, right? Yoga, things like that, or whatever. And then you can, depending upon how you want to do it. So I would say it's probably more about 600 minutes a week. It's probably about 90 minutes a day of total workout time. And there again, by workout time, it doesn't mean you have to be in a gym and, your workout clothes doing specific exercises like this. That could be literally playing basketball, doing whatever. But I think to do anything less than an hour a day and half of that being vigorous activity is a disservice to the body, unless like you're disabled. And if you're disabled still, I would say get on a UBE and crank away. Because if not, the systems are going to get all out of whack. So I would say as a basic rule, an hour a day, and then 20 minutes of that pretty intense.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Last question for me. Do you have any exercises that are your favorite or most recommended for tendon strengthening around the knees and the elbows?
So when you think about like the tendons, it's the same way that you're pretty much going to strengthen the muscles. You just got to think at the extremity, right? Wherever it's at. So like, for example, if I want to strengthen the bicep tendon closest to the forearm, right? I'm going to do a better job when I get to about here and I'm going to be able to put a pretty heavy load onto it, right? So you'll see guys in jiu-jitsu that want to strengthen that, or you could do like an eccentric, right? Because you got to think the tendons, they're going to be slower to develop than the muscles. So eccentric, just slow, lowering of the weight with a heavier weight than what you can lift. The problem is if you're talking about like, so the knees, you could do like a leg extension, right? Like a leg extension machine. There's a lot of shear going into the knee joint though when you do that. So I don't know if that, maybe it's going to develop strength in the patella tendon. And there's probably people that do that, but I just have this suspicion that it's because it's an unnatural motion. It's probably going to cause more damage to the knee than not. So then the functional movement pattern will be like a lunge or a squat. But the problem is if you're really focusing on those eccentric muscle, because when you're creating that stretch reflex that's happening, it's really going to make the tendon get stronger. The idea of putting a super heavy weight that you can't lift onto your back, right? I don't like how that's going to compress the joints. So I would say the tendons just strengthen naturally over time. The main way that people have strengthened tendons and ligaments throughout history is isometrics, basically finding the range where they feel it's weakest and then just driving against it. So then you just think about the mechanic, whether it's, like if I'm going to, for example, I'm just going to extend my arm or something, right? So I can put my arm against something and say, I know I'm weak there and I'm trying to drive and it's just like an immovable object. I've never really done it that often. Gymnasts do use isometrics. I do use some isometric training. I'm not against it. To me, though, the process just seems really tedious, but it would have value, especially if you're an arm wrestler, right? You think about arm wrestling, they kind of lock into this isometric component. So to develop that is probably really important. For choking, right, in jiu-jitsu, I've seen people do weird stuff like same thing. They try to strengthen the choking arm, the idea of the tendon strength, but really it's still muscular strength to a degree. And I found that maybe that works, but becoming more efficient at the technique has a bigger payoff. That's like there again, I think the epitome, power lifters, I think there's some irony in weightlifting and powerlifting. Power lifters are by far just pure moving sheer weight, the strongest people on earth, right? You look at the bench press, the deadlift, the squat numbers. A lot of that though, at the numbers they're getting at today is through a lot of assistance equipment too, right? Just like the belts, the suits, they're strapping everything in and creating more compression. So it's almost like they're creating an extra fascial network on top of their own fascial network just to keep the numbers going up. What I like about Olympic lifting, if you look, they wear shoes. The shoe gives a little cheek because it puts a little lift in the heel, which lets them squat deeper, lets the knee go forward more. They do wear a belt when they're going out for their, max lift. But if you look at it, the emphasis of Olympic lifting, the epitome of power, I don't think you get more powerful than an Olympic lifter, right? It's the epitome of power. And I think power is the epitome of athletic excellence, power and speed. And while there's definitely a genetic component, like a fiber type and all this stuff, and, but it's more neural. And I actually think that's the real key to strength is technique and form and almost everything. And to be certain, if you have a weak area, like if when you're abducting the shoulder, at this point, you feel pain, I would say you could do some strengthening. Like there again, you wouldn't want to go to the hand with a dumbbell. You'd want to go with the resistance against there. But what you got to watch whenever you're doing stuff like that is that you're not, if you can see, like pulling from the neck, right? So it's those isolating type motions. So you can do stuff like that. That's what I've read as the prescription for tendon strengthening, but I've never personally done it. I've found that I've always maintained a pretty good body balance just by doing, I do isometrics, but I don't do them that specific is what I'm saying. But that's the general theory of what I've read of how people do it.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else, Perseith? All righty, guys. Well, hopefully that helps some, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks,
too.
Eric.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.